we are back. I dropped off there for a moment. Basie, welcome to another episode of the Friday Flowdown. We'll do the intro again. Yeah, essentially I am going to have Natalie K. Martin on today. She's a yoga instructor and also a menstrual cycle awareness coach as well. So we'll be chatting kind of about lots of different topics. We'll be talking about menstrual cycle awareness. We'll be talking about yoga. We'll be talking about some cool products that she's kind of bringing out as well, her own experience in that space, and then we'll also be talking about representation in these two spaces as well, because they're super important. So but yeah, I've just seen that she's joined here, so hopefully she'll ask to join, and then we'll kind of kick the party off. But yeah, super excited. She's I love the content that she puts out, and her energy is always excellent, which is great. Hello. How are you?
Hello.
How are you getting on? I was just giving a little intro to you there while we're just waiting to kind of get set up. So yeah, so how are you doing?
Yay. Yeah, I'm good. I'm really good. I'm struggling to get back into the work vibe after having a
Really?
weekend without any work, and the weather's really glorious here finally. So I've been struggling to kind of get back into it. It's taken all week.
And then I'm like, hey, do you want to come on and have a chat on Instagram? And you're like, oh, not really.
And now it's Friday and it's like, oh, I'm gonna do something.
I know. Yeah, it's one of the, I guess, the like pros and but also cons of A, when you're working for yourself, but also B, if you're trying to, I guess, like embrace that whole cyclical living, is that like sometimes you can just go totally off the radar and you're like, oh, I haven't really done anything for like 2 days, 3 days. But I think it's good that you're embracing that though, no? But
Yeah,
take
yeah.
advantage of the weather.
Yeah, it helps. Like it's just sunshine finally. We've had just
Fab.
such bad rain and constant storms, and so yeah, I'm like, whew, this is my weather. This is my
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm feeling really good.
It's your vibe. No, it's the same with me. We had a really hot week for Ireland. It was like reached like 28, 30. And for me, I was like, amazing. Like, I love this. This is what I want. And then, but I train and I do pre and postnatal training as well. So I also had to like cancel all the pregnancy classes. So I was like, we can't train. So
Yeah.
they were all admitting to me this week. They're like, I'm kind of glad that it's not as hot. And I'm like, I'm happy for you, but I'm sad for me. So I definitely feel that you're in the same boat. So when someone says they miss the or they're enjoying the hot weather, I'm like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, for sure. It's gorgeous.
But yeah. But look, anyway, all of that aside, and again, I appreciate taking the time to come on and have a chat, especially if the weather's good and especially if you're kind of in a slower week. But yeah, I guess just for anyone who's listening, so I came across you watching Vianney Lee of the statusflow.co. So anyone who's followed her or doesn't follow her, she's great. Does a lot of stuff with like energy work and menstrual cycle awareness, and it's all my vibe. But you guys had a great Instagram chat live, and I think it's also a podcast episode, isn't it, on her podcast as well? Yeah.
It is,
So
yeah.
again, anyone who's listening who's into podcasts, her podcast is great as well. But I remember obviously loads of things came up while I was listening to it, but one in particular, and I think I did message you, I think I came out of it to message you being like, oh my God, I like blah blah blah, was when you were talking about yoga and menstrual cycle awareness, but actually trying to be a yoga instructor while living cyclically and like doing a class, you're coaching a class, and you're like, does this actually sit where I am? And I was like, oh wow. I was like, I've been there as well, or like just like I was like, yes. I was like, she knows what it's like, because it's hard for me anyway. Sorry, see, there's obviously loads of people who are talking about coaching and menstrual cycle awareness and all this kind of stuff, but then no one's really talking about the realities of how difficult that can actually be to have a set class or do things in a structured way, but you're also then trying to respect your own cyclical life and your own energies and everything. So, and yeah, I was just like, wow, I want to chat to you more about this.
Yeah.
get you on to talk about that sort of stuff. So, but I guess, do you want to give a little intro about yourself and a background about kind of who you are, the work you do?
Yeah, so I wear a lot of hats. So I'm a yoga teacher. I am a menstrual cycle awareness coach. I write books. I'm a waitress. Like, I've got quite a lot going on. I've been teaching yoga now fully for about 5 years, but practicing much longer than that. And there really has never been like anything to do with the menstrual cycle in there at all. It was never part of any class I've been to, even the trainings that I've been on. There have been sections about women's yoga, but nothing to do with menstrual cycle awareness. And I've been getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the menstrual cycle awareness world for a couple of years now, but started my education last year to coach. And yeah, I think the pandemic really helped because obviously we had to pivot to being online. And the beginning of the lockdown was just like the beginning of the lockdown, there's been so many. The beginning of the pandemic was like pretty much everyone was, you know, hopping on Instagram and showing up on Zoom and doing these online classes, and myself included, a few classes a week online, and just doing things the way that I'd always done them. So I usually teach flow classes. I like yin. I do teach yin as well, but I was mostly doing live classes, and I found that actually this way of practicing, of teaching flow and then teaching flow online, just meant that I was constantly showing what I was doing, and recurring injuries were coming back that I hadn't had for some time. And there just came one day when I got my period and I thought, oh God, I have to teach tonight. I don't want to do this. Like, I don't want to do a flow class. I don't have the energy and I can't be bothered. And so I just basically put out that, okay, today's going to be a yin class because that's how I'm feeling. And the response was really good. And so I decided I wanted to just have one yin class every month, which would be in line with my menstrual cycle, basically. And then I kind of started to tune into it a little bit more around, like, how do I feel week by week when I'm practicing. I always give myself what I need, but while teaching, I just, you know, was just showing up the way that I always showed up, because we are kind of taught in the yoga world to just keep doing what works, right? So you go to a studio, you find a class you like, and you expect that to basically be the way it is every week. And I just found myself kind of, you know, starting to get a bit bored, honestly, of doing these same kind of classes every week. Diving really deep into my menstrual cycle awareness education, and just feeling like this isn't sustainable for me. I can't keep teaching like this. Who knows when the lockdown will end? What can I do? And so I basically thought, well, I want to teach the way that I practice. And actually, wouldn't it be amazing? Because I didn't know anyone who was doing it. I was like, I want to be able to find a class that's suitable for my menstrual phase that I'm in. And I didn't know anyone who's doing that. There was one person or two people I found on Instagram. One of them, her membership was closed. The other one, her website was just never working and she never replied back. And so I was like, maybe I'm going to have to do this for myself. And so I
go for it.
My membership, and I did it myself. And now that we are back in the land of real life classes, it's not been so easy to translate, I have to admit. I've found myself just slipping back into that, you know, like I'm just teaching what I need to teach. I teach a morning class right now. In my studio classes, but in my private classes there, I'm able to really just be like, okay, we're gonna, because my private class, she's very open, she's very happy to know, like, you know, to try new styles, whereas the group classes can tend to feel a little bit more restricted. And so what I find myself doing is basically, you know, no one wants to do restorative in the morning. It's just like not setting your
unless you're me, and I'm like, I will do restorative whenever.
Right, but most people like, expect like to have a class where they're going to wake up a little bit. And so I'm starting to demonstrate a whole lot less when I'm you know, when I'm in those slow phases of my cycle, and sometimes also just changing up the pace a little bit. So I think there's a, you know, it's such a new concept. There is this balance that needs to be found between people who are teaching Ashtanga or power yoga or, you know, CrossFit or whatever it might be, so that the students and the clients are getting what they need, but that you're also honoring what's going on inside your own body, because it can be hard to like pull this like, whoa, motivation energy out the bag when you're just like, ugh.
I know, because it is hard. Like I was the same. I started doing it's not quite yoga, but it'd be like a mobility type of flow class, and like again with the gym that I was working in, I was like, yeah, it makes total sense. We'll have like they were all about periodized programming and like progression and everything, which is fantastic, and that's the type of gym it is. And like I was totally bought into that. And I'd be like, yeah, we'll have 3 weeks of like strong flow and like building up everyone's mobility and really like working up these like isometrics and all this kind of stuff, and then we'll have a lovely restorative one at the end. And part of me was like, oh, amazing. Most of the time it's going to line up with where I am in my cycle, but then sometimes it wouldn't. And you'd literally be like getting out of bed being like, oh, I need to just like get it, and you'd be trying to like pump yourself up and you're like, all I want to do is just like have a little chill morning flow and like get people just like doing static stretches and just like feeling relaxed for the end of the month, but it didn't always line up. And it's it's funny how well, sorry, again, I'm speaking for myself here, but like when I started looking into all this stuff, you realize how not set up it is for people who want to teach in this way or who want to kind of live in this way. And it's really about trying to like unpick all of those things.
Mm.
But yeah, I just loved that you were talking about it because I was like, obviously, like, so my partner's coach as well, and I'd be talking to him and I'd be like, oh, I'm wrecked, I don't want to do this or whatever. But like, I hadn't actually really been talking to anyone who's, I guess, a cyclical being who also coaches that is trying to manage that new awareness within themselves.
Yeah.
Especially in live classes or like or not, sorry, not on demand classes, whether that's like live online or whether it's live in person. But it seems that the space is opening up way more to it. Like, I don't know about where you are, but like over in Ireland here, it's like exploded. Like loads of coaches are talking about it more, like yoga teachers in particular, which is kind of cool to see.
Awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
I live in Bavaria in southern Germany, and it's
Mm.
quite a conservative place. There's lots of yoga, but
Okay.
it's very, yeah, like yin yoga is very new around here. Restorative yoga is very new
Okay.
around here. There is nothing to do with menstrual cycle awareness at all. I think there's one other person who's doing menstrual cycle awareness coaching here. So it's very, on one hand, it's like there isn't the infrastructure, but on the other hand, there's a lot of possibility.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, like with a lot of things, if you don't know, you don't know. So it almost just needs someone to be the one to be like, okay, this is what's happening, and then
Yeah.
go from there.
Give it. And
And
also, I think it's refreshing as well. Like when you hear coaches talk about it, because again, I'd be in the gym and I'd just be like talking with my clients, and I brought it into my one-to-one clients like very quickly once I started learning about it more from a sports science sort of point of view. And I'd just be talking about it, and I'd be like, we are gonna. I wouldn't force anyone, but I was like, I'm going to approach this as if I was asking you about how did you sleep or like how's your hydration go? And I was just like, where are you in your menstrual cycle? And oh yeah, I get like that as well and stuff. And just like through talking about it, just trying to like normalize it because some people would be uncomfortable with it because it's such a new concept and it's quite a private thing. But
yeah,
I think through like example, if you can try and just like normalize that conversation of being like, guys, I'm actually a bit wrecked. I'm just going to slow it down a little bit. Or if you're feeling tired, you can go for this. Or if you're feeling really good, you can go for that option.
mm-hmm.
Um, but it's kind of interesting to see where it will go. Like, I don't know how you feel about it all. Like, you know,
Well, I feel like it's got a long way to go in the yoga world,
mm,
because there is like womb yoga that's out there, right? So there is this
yeah,
branch of yoga that's for people with wombs, but I like it, but it's very, very subtle.
okay,
It's like working more with energy as opposed to, which yoga is as well, but
mm,
it's not yoga like we know it. So
yeah, it's
it's
not the
not this
physical
kind of
side.
like get out, get on your mat and move with your breath and everything. It's a very different kind of yoga, and so it feels like we just need something to fill the gap in between. And I think for most people, they just don't realize that their menstrual cycle impacts so much of their life. So they'd be
Mm,
like, well, why do I need to care about yoga with my menstrual cycle? Because,
yeah,
they don't know that where they are in their menstrual cycle will affect how much energy they have, will affect how much physical strength they have. And I think when you can put it into those kind of examples, so they can actually really see and be like, oh wow, you mean that's why I'm craving carbs at one particular time, and that's
yeah,
why I'm you know, really able to push myself through this workout at this time, and whereas I can't at another time, then it switches on. So I think there's a lot of potential, but
Yeah.
it's yeah, there's not enough of us yet, but there will be, I guess, just from, you know, more awareness and things like this where we're talking about it in a, you know, public space and
Yeah.
people can hear and learn. Yeah.
No, I think like, and I think you're right, and it's trying to figure out how it works for best. Like I quite liked it, and again, I haven't signed up for it. I know that when I saw it on your website, I messaged you, and I was like, I've actually just signed up for another yoga thing. But once that's done, I was like, I'm gonna do your one because it is for me just practicing or working out myself. I just like pick and mix. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just go on and be like, I know they do a strong flow, or
Yeah.
even like. And I know I shouldn't say this, but using the Down Dog app, if I only have like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, being like, okay, I'm going to pick a strong one, or I know I'm sorry, like, but and like, you know, just even stuff like that. So I think having a space where you can go in and be like, you know, here's a cycle for this, or here's a workout for this phase of your cycle and everything. Like it's such a great concept, and like I don't know, I think it's cool. I think it'd be like great to see where that kind of space is going now, especially in yoga and especially in training in particular. And I think like going back to the menstrual cycle awareness, like how did you come into that, or how did you find that? I'm always curious about people's stories about how they came across it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I came off the pill 2017, and I was very much into fertility awareness tracking, so I was basically using that as my form of contraception and birth control.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all fine, but there were things that I was reading and hearing and seeing on Instagram that didn't line up with my reality. So I was usually having my period with the full moon instead of the new moon, and
Okay.
I kept reading that ovulation is supposed to feel great, and I would just feel like absolute crap.
Yeah.
And I was like, something's strange here, like what is that? And it's funny, I bought a book called Red Moon by Miranda Gray years ago. Like, I don't even know what made me buy it, but it was before I'd even understood that there was such a thing as menstrual cycle awareness. And then when I finally got around to reading it, I was kind of like, well, that's interesting. Like, you know, it's interesting, but it didn't make an impact on me. And then my partner really realized, like, you know, what is happening with you every month? Like, why are you just tanking for no apparent reason? And then I started to kind of really look into it, and it was like, I've always loved the stuff to do with the cycle. So when I learned about fertility awareness, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I need to tell everybody about it. But there was something missing. There was this, like, it's an amazing thing to be able to look at your body and read your signs of fertility, but it wasn't telling me what my day-to-day experience was, and there was no way to put it into context. So that's kind of my entry in, was just from having a cycle that felt different to what I was reading about. And I've been following Claire Baker for a while. I had joined her Heartful Biz course like, I think like 2 years ago, and it sat in my email inbox because I just, you know, didn't get around to it. And then I started doing it last year, at the beginning of the year, so before lockdown. And then I got in contact with Vienda Maria. She was my coach for a little while. And then these two just came together, and I was like, Claire Baker's doing menstrual cycle awareness, like what? And then it just, it became this lovely thing. And that was kind of like my initiation, really, which I think for most people is, right? I think for most people, you come into it because something is quote unquote wrong or not normal in comparison to what other people tell you. And or there's something that needs to be fixed. So
exactly. And like,
I'm glad I'm not the only one it took years to read.
I saw that comment come in, and I was like, you know, I haven't even read it, but like there's so many books out there, so I'm like adding it to the list to read. But for me it was I'm going to say it, and hopefully they don't take me down, because Instagram always takes me down when I do it. But the Red School's book, the Wild Power, it's I don't know, Instagram blocks them for whatever reason. But I don't know what it is, but it's really weird. You can tag them in stories, but you can't tag them in posts. So I don't know. Hopefully this story saves now after this with this Instagram live, but it's weird. But their Wild Power book was what I read from. I'd read like other books from more like a sports training and a kind of more like health point of view and stuff, but they were the one that I read from like a kind of spiritual and emotional one, and I was like, this is amazing. I was like, this is so cool. I was like, this, and it kind of to your point, like it makes sense because, and again, I don't know what the red moon's like, but it's about, it kind of encourages you to embrace what your experience is. And yes, there might be similarities or you might expect to see X, Y, and Z, but you know, it's actually about like what that experience is for you and how you can kind of reclaim it as your own and how you can kind of, I don't know, find your kind of self-care or your kind of space within that and stuff. And it's incredible. And I was just like, again, for me anyway, I felt like it was that little missing piece because again, in modern society, we're so on and active and it's the doing and it's the this and there's like this lovely, and even me, that's how I came into it, was like, how do you optimize your training? Like, how do you get stronger and fitter and like, you know, all this kind of stuff. We're missing a trick kind of a thing. And then I kind of opened my eyes to this whole side being like, well, actually, do we even need to? And in some cases you do, but like, can we not just sit with it? And does it have to be this kind of the same experience that everyone should be having? And, you know, so I think from your story, it's almost a beautiful way of coming into it, being like, well, I thought there was something wrong. And actually, I just realized that it was my own experience of that. And I just like embraced that, which I love.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely worked on those things, like, you know, understanding the reason why I was dipping in the middle of my cycle. It made so much sense. And so now I am able to have cycles where I don't have this dip because I know how to look after myself overall. So I wouldn't say I fixed it because it's my natural default setting. I think that we all just have those places where we feel good and where we don't feel so good. But learning how to just like align yourself a bit better and how to learn how to live more in tune with your own cycle and to prioritize rest and self-care and all of that kind of thing goes a really long way. So it's like on one hand it's being able to accept who you are, where you are and what your experience is, but also learning like how you can address this stuff. And I mean, I love it because there's just so many facets to it. It's without end. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. No, I feel the same. I think for anyone who's listening in, or like if you were talking to yourself back like 5 years ago, let's say, like you're just starting out in the yoga space or the movement space, and you're kind of interested in this concept of like yoga with your menstrual cycle, like what would you be like 2 to 3 tips for them or like recommendations for them or past you? I know I'm kind of catching you on the spot here, but just if anything's
it's an
jumping to your
interesting
mind.
question. I think I want to say I would try to find a yoga training that incorporates this, but I mean, maybe I'm not like a know-all of yoga teacher trainings. But I would, if you're interested in this, then I would definitely recommend trying to find one that has a more rounded approach. I was very lucky that my yoga school was not just like you're learning vinyasa and that's it. Like there was a lot of variation in there. And actually, when I think about how my teacher taught, like we never knew what class we were getting. We would come into the shallow in the morning and sometimes it would be like incredibly difficult and we would be holding plank for a very long time and like, you know, really like strong. And then other times we'd come and sit down and you'd be like, okay, today we're going to do yoga nidra. So actually just trying to understand that there doesn't have to just be one way to teach yoga. There's many different styles, and how you teach in those styles can also inform a lot. I would also encourage not demonstrating everything.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
It's hard to do, especially as a new teacher, because, you know, and I think especially if you're someone like, I'm very much into embodiment, and so when I'm teaching, I also like to be able to be making the movements so that I can feel and breathe everything not everything the students are doing as well, but just to be in that kind of bubble. And that's great sometimes, but it's very difficult to honor your own energy then if you are teaching a more dynamic class, because if if you're on day 2 or day 3 of your period, for example, and you've got heavy bleeding, you've got cramps, you've got a headache, and you feel really sluggish, then knowing how to sit on your mat and direct a class is going to serve you much better. So really trying to get out of that habit as soon as possible. Actually, that should be tip number 1.
Yeah, it's a good one though, because especially in yoga, because I almost do feel there's an expectation that you go to a yoga class and it's like a follow along class. Like not always, but for the most part, then people come around and move around and like correct you and stuff. But
yeah,
do you know where maybe in a gym space there's a more of an expectation maybe that you're coaching rather than demonstrating, or you know that sort of way. So I think it's a great tip.
Absolutely. Sorry. There's a lawn being mowed right next to me. I hope that's not disturbing.
I didn't even notice until you said it. It's very slight. It's okay. My next door neighbor was playing music beforehand. I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to move room. Like,
there is, and I think that plays into the whole thing about the expectations of the yoga world when it comes to anything to do with yoga. There is an expectation that you go in, there's a teacher at the front, they're going to walk you through, they're going to show you everything, and that almost means then that as a student you don't have to tune into your body very well. Like there are times when you're teaching someone who, they are an advanced student, they come to your class every week, but still you can sense that there is a disconnect between what you are saying and what they're doing, or their understanding of it. And I think it's just so easy for someone to say, step forward with your right foot, and you step forward with your right foot, and bend your knee to this degree, and do that, and do this. But sometimes if you're being led so much, and if you're just looking at the front, you're not paying that much attention to actually what's happening inside of you, like what's happening in your body. How do you need to move today? And I think that must be my number 3 tip, is to try and find a studio where you can have some flexibility. And I know it's not easy because you're a new teacher, you're just concerned with like getting yourself set up and getting people in your class, and there can be a little bit of a loss of integrity sometimes until you find your feet. But I'm very lucky here that the yoga studio where I teach, I have an amazing teacher, an amazing boss. She's like one of my closest friends here. And when I explain or, say that I want to teach in a certain way, there's no, but it's expected to be like this. And I'm really lucky with that. I know that not everyone is. I know that there are studios where it's just about getting the people in the door. But again, it's this like, find your integrity. And because that's how, like, the quickest way to burn out as a yoga teacher is just to get up there and perform and do and perform and do, and not be able to like honor your own energy as well. So those are my 3 tips. Find a teacher training that's varied, or at least try and find a workshop or something where people are talking about menstrual cycle awareness, to understand what your students are also dealing with. Then be in integrity, try to find a studio where you can do what you need to, and try not to demonstrate all the time.
Super. No, I think they're really good, because like I know it can be hard, like you learn all this stuff and it's like, oh my God, I want to do it all, I want to put it into practice, but it's like, well, how do you even start, and like what's the first step to that? And I think all of those ones are like good first steps, if you know what I mean, like until you're more comfortable with the concept, and then you can kind of branch out a little more, and then it can be like, get to the point where you are comfortable turning around to a class and being like, I feel this way, so I'm going to be stepping back on my mat a little bit more, and you're going to be doing it. Or even just, and I think you do this on your online ones, where the live one is more, do you base that off where you are in your own cycle and how you're feeling? Which I think is brilliant.
So from August there are no more live classes, because I think it's just, it's enough to be able to just go in and say, okay, I'm in my premenstrual phase, I can choose this, this, and this. But and how I'm doing it now, it's always based on where I'm at, because it's not possible. Like, everyone is on different days in their cycle.
Yeah, of course.
And even if you are all on the same day, you're going to have like different experiences. So I find it easier to base it on where I'm at. And usually because you are leading that class, they're kind of tuning into your energy a bit anyway. So if you are feeling, I've noticed it for me, if I'm feeling in a very grounded, contemplative, like a very kind of deep mood, you know, like obviously I will choose music that reflects that. Maybe I will change the lighting to reflect that, and so that's the vibe that's given out to the class as well. So it's just, I think it's just confidence. And you know, when I've been teaching for a few years, and also in my case, I didn't have an option. Like I was getting injured constantly, and I was just like not doing it anymore. So I think when you feel confident enough and you get to a stage where you have to, for whatever reason, then you just do.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's so good. And I think as well, like how with the menstrual cycle awareness, I know that's kind of like opened up more offerings that you're kind of doing online or doing kind of coaching and stuff. And obviously I was on to you about one of those, which I think is really cool. There's kind of two that you've got really is I know one is probably closed for entry now was the Love Your Flow.
Yeah.
And then the period power up. So like I'd love for you to chat about them and kind of talk about what they involve and all that kind of stuff. I think they're great.
Sure. So Love Your Flow is really about the menstrual phase of the cycle. I'm very big on mindful menstruation. It's probably my favorite phase of the cycle now, and it's the phase that I think a lot of people struggle with, and is probably one of the main reasons why people get into this in the first place. And you know, if nothing else, as we've said, like the world is just not set up for us when we bleed, really. And so Love Your Flow is, of course, you're learning about the cycle as a whole, but it's really focused on your period and the way, and teaching you that the way that you live can impact how you experience your bleed. There's learnings around the actual cycle and then around menstruality. So talking about frameworks like the inner winter, like your inner wise woman, setting yourself up with some rituals and so on, so that when your period comes around, it's hopefully less traumatic. And is something that you don't have to come to with a sense of fear and a sense of like, oh God, it's that time again, right? It's like, how can you find a way to make space for this in your life and to make the best out of it, essentially? Because I think that has a lot to do with how we experience our period, how we experience our whole cycle, and how everyone else around us views the cycle. And then, you know, that trickles out to cultural norms, you know. And if your mother or your aunt or your grandmother or whoever is constantly complaining about their period while you're growing up, and you know, maybe they have a really rough time, but they're constantly complaining about it, then you are going to grow up thinking like, oh God, this is nothing good, and I want to change that. So that's Love Your Flow. It's currently running right now. We are just approaching the last week. It's a 4-week course, and I'll be opening that up again afterwards quite soon. It's a really lovely course. There's yoga in there, there's cacao ceremonies in there. So it's basically like this self-care bubble. And then premenstrual power up is it's a 6-hour intensive, so it's like a whole day with me. And the idea behind it really is going back to my corporate background, which includes many things, from working in HR, being an office manager, managing property, and just being someone who likes to kind of make sense out of mess. And I love that. Know, like take all the to-do lists and the post-it notes and create some kind of order. And as a self-employed person, it's so difficult because you've got to do everything. You're the admin, you're the accountant, you're the marketer, you're the social media person, you know, all those things. And it can just become this big like mess. And on top of that, you have your menstrual cycle, which is fantastic. But, you know, there are vulnerable times in there. And for a lot of us, the premenstrual phase can be quite it can be a place where the inner critic is quite loud and likes to tell us that we're doing things wrong, we don't have any idea what we're doing, who do we think we are to have a business, why don't you just go back to what you were doing before, throw it all in, like, look, you're still not making money after a year, what are you doing, all that kind of stuff. And while that's, you know, while that is, it's difficult to deal with, my experience is that the inner critic always has nuggets of truth in it. And so I thought, well, I want to create the space where we can go into this premenstrual phase, get out these pearls of wisdom from the inner critic, and actually use them to move you forwards in your business. And as well as that, kind of powering through or clearing through, or creating a plan for where you want to go next. So in my mind, I'm kind of, you know, when I was creating it, I was envisaging someone with like 100 lists of paper on the desk.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, let's start again with a fresh sheet of paper.
Clean slate.
Yeah, just, you know, create some order, and because your premenstrual phase can be a place where you have such great clarity, right? You can look at things and be like, actually, that's not working. It's a waste of my time. Don't want that. Or, you know, like, so it's actually using these hidden superpowers that look like weaknesses to get the most out of them. So yeah, they're two projects that I'm really excited about, and I think it's, you know, I think it's just about time that we change the narrative on periods, and that for women business owners and entrepreneurs, or even just, you know, people who are employed but have a degree of control over what they can do day to day, that we actually start to employ that and become more sustainable with how we run our businesses and how we work and everything else.
Yeah, it's so important because, again, I think the more and more you, again, speaking for myself, the more and more I kind of dive into this myself and like look at patterns and everything, you kind of almost take it in like layers, or at least I did, where I was like, okay, it's the training, and then it's actually my energy, and then it's my nutrition, and then it's this, and you kind of go through, and then you kind of start to notice like relationships, then you start to notice like your work, especially self-employed, where you do have that flexibility where you can kind of adapt it, and you do spot patterns that kind of come out in how you're working and stuff, and like you do get those wobbles sometimes, but I do think it's great to see more and more people like talking about the positives that can come out of when you're bleeding or when you're premenstrual, and actually learning to like sit with that, and how like it's not a bad time. Like, yeah, the inner critic is there, but actually the inner critic can like teach you things, or it can highlight something if you're willing to kind of sit with it and explore it and kind of tap into your intuition and all this kind of stuff. And because I remember I think I said this in the last talk as well, I was doing a presentation for the gym that I used to work in, and I was trying to find like some funny gifts, just to go, like, a lot of the guys, they were guys, so I was like, let's just try and like break up the, like, you know, the seriousness that we're talking about, like bleeding, and there was no positive funny memes or anything about menstruation. It was all like, you know, like this uterus with a dagger and stuff. And I was like, like, it's not all that bad. Like, you know, you don't want to feed into that at all.
Yes.
So no, I think it's great that there's more and more people in this space, or even shifting the narrative away from trying to fix it to being like, let's embrace it and let's like understand where you are and how do we work best with that to support you. And again, from that business point of view, it's just, it makes sense, you know what I mean? Like, I saw you post up about it and I was like, amazing,
Yeah. And
let's
I mean,
chat about it.
I think, you know, like with the lockdown especially, people are becoming more aware of how unhealthy it has been in this work culture that we've you know, just had, and has been like handed down over the years. And I think people are just working themselves to exhaustion. You know, there's like, burnout is a real and very common thing. And, you know, when you're constantly available because you've got your personal email and your work email on your mobile phone, and you've got social media, which is keeping in contact with friends but also business, like, it's really hard sometimes to divide the line. And, you know, if you use the alarm on your phone, you wake up in the morning, you turn it, and then you look at the phone, and then you're looking, you know, you go to the toilet and you open up Instagram, and like, there's no real downtime anymore. And I think that a lot of people are starting to kind of wonder, like, does it always have to be like this? And
Yeah.
it's difficult because, especially if you're self-employed, you're building your own business, you do have to put this, you have to start, and you do have to have some push. Um, but it's at some point you also have to learn when it's time to step back a little bit. When is it time to take your foot off the pedal a little bit and trust that um, you might not get to it this week, but it doesn't matter because you'll get to it at some other point, like probably in the next month or whatever, and you'll
Yeah.
have a better perspective to do it, instead of like sitting and like this week I've been supposed to be working on my book, and I have done little bits and pieces, but I haven't got anywhere near as far as I would like. But then I realized, like, this is just not the time for me. Like, this time of my cycle is when I can sit down and go through things and just clear things away. I'm in my premenstrual phase. It's not a time where I feel like I'm able to sit and pull like certain images and words out and create something beautiful. And that's okay. Like, I don't have to do it now, because I can also do it later and better
Yeah,
as
exactly.
well.
And it's that trust that, sorry, again, speaking for myself, but it's that trust in knowing that you will be fine, because you're like, I've done this before, and I know that I actually fly through stuff, and the stuff that I come out with this time, where like my ideas are big, and again, I think one of the times I messaged you and I was like, hey, because I was just like, I've got so many ideas and I need someone to help me like guide them, and blah blah. And that was when I was kind of like in my spring or whatever, going into my summer, and I was just like, I'm just like buzzing with stuff, and you got to trust that you'll get it done, and those big projects will happen, or that actually I'll be better suited to sitting down and doing my little typey admin stuff when I'm at certain phases, and that might be different for different people, but
Mm-hmm.
it's that trust as well that I found was hugely liberating for me
Yeah.
anyway, just being like, it'll happen, I'll get it
Well, I
done.
think we want things to happen like straight away,
I know.
and it's this instant gratification kind of thing. And
Yeah.
like, I'm someone, I have ideas that I sit on and I just write them down in my planner, and then I don't look at them again. And it might take 6 months or a year before oh yeah, wow, I had that idea, like now's a good time to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the time we just want to like do things now and push through now. And it's a little bit like fashion, I guess, right? There's slow fashion, and then there's this like quick fashion, and it's not much different. And I feel like this impatience to produce now, like this is very masculine energy of like, produce now, just do this thing now, instead of actually let me sit on it and see, does it make sense for me? I'm also very much into human design, and I'm a projector with a lot of open centers, and I'm someone who gets ideas all the time, especially from other people. And I'll be like, wow, that's a great idea. Ooh, how can I incorporate that? And I've learned not to just be like, okay, now I'm going to do that, and go off and do it and put all my energy and effort into it, because it's not mine. And if I would only sit and go through this cycle of listening to my intuition and really looking at it in a more long distance way, then I save time, and I save energy, and I save stress, and I save God knows what else,
Amazing.
money, and
I'm like, it all sounds great. Yeah, exactly. Well,
everything.
that's it. Like, because your time is money. I think
Exactly.
especially a self-employed person, like you're not working on someone else's money. Like you're working on your own money, and like if you actually put that into what you bill, it's just like you're like, I'm just
Right.
wasted. Like,
Right.
how many weeks doing this, and sometimes that lesson is worth learning, but other times it's not, and you just wasted time and energy, as you said, doing something that you feel you should, or someone else's idea. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really great advice. And like, I know as well, and it's one of the things I did want to kind of bring up on this, because I think I was talking to you before, where I was like, okay, so my audience is like mostly like white cisgendered women, but like we, especially working in the space of yoga and menstrual cycle awareness, and again, after the last couple of years, like there's just been like horrific shit going on in the world, but like I was touched at how, or moved, I guess, at how, like, honestly, yourself and Vianney were talking about how lonely you can be in that space. And I guess it's one of those things, it's not that I took it for granted at all, but I think it's something that that I can forget walking into a space, especially in Ireland. It's changed massively. But like when I was younger and I first started getting into yoga and stuff like that, you're walking in as like cisgendered, white female, able-bodied, walking into a space that's probably up steps, or, you know, this kind of stuff, and you don't really think about it, and the teacher looks like you, and, you
Mm-hmm.
know, everyone's kind of the same, from the same class or same demographic or whatever. And it's not until you get older you have an experience, and it shouldn't be like this. It should, you know, like, I think it massively needs to change. But I was hoping that you'd be kind of willing to talk a little bit about that, and kind of talk maybe a little about what you think we can all do to kind of help change that experience. And I know you've been doing some stuff yourself, like scholarships and everything, which I think is fantastic. And so yeah, I just kind of wanted to bring that up because I think it's such an important topic, and can
Mm.
be uncomfortable
Yeah.
for people to bring up and talk about it. And I'm like, yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
we should, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah,
yeah.
it's funny actually, because so last summer, um, after the whole George Floyd everything,
Mm,
I think that's when I really first realized also how privileged I was. Although,
mm,
you know, I'm a black woman from London, I really realized that me as a black woman in the UK, or as a black person in the UK, probably feels infinitely safer than being a black person
mm,
in America. And so it was one of those things where I also tapped into my own privilege, and I kind of just felt a little bit like, how can I contribute to this? And so, I created a workshop which was all about, you know, confronting your own privilege. It was especially targeted towards white people, but it was, you know, I was just, you know, there was a lot of anger, and I was like, how can I
mm,
approach this in a way that is welcoming and not pointing fingers, but actually just allows people to actually reflect on what their own privilege is. And that's how Claire Baker came to that, and that's how
okay.
we like really established contact. And I think it was maybe like, it can't have been more than a week afterwards that I saw on her Instagram that she had this BIPOC scholarship for her cycle coach training,
Mm,
and it was an amazing thing to go through, because I it's not that I wouldn't have done the course without the scholarship. I'm someone who, I'm very driven. So if I want to do something, I'll do it. And I'm used to being like the only non-white person in a group of, you know, like for teacher trainings and workshops and all that kind of
mm,
stuff. Um, but I've noticed for sure that it is a very white space, and it's a strange thing because we all have wounds, whether like we're white or
no.
black or brown or whatever. Um, and it's definitely getting better. It is. I think it's just a thing of visibility, and I think that people probably just think, well, I'm not racist, I'm not discriminating anyone, I'm putting this offer out here, for anyone who wants to join. And it can be really small signals, like, you know, if you're using stock photos, if everyone in that group is white,
Mm,
like how welcoming is that going to be for someone who isn't white? And it's not to say that you then have to search for stock images to include people who aren't white, but it's, you know, there's just these small things, that if you're not living the experience of a BIPOC person, you probably will never really understand. And I think a lot of it is just making yourself more visible, and it's about making people more welcome. So you don't have to do scholarships. I know many people who do, but I also know a whole ton more people who don't.
mm,
And I think, you know, it's like just being more vocal about this stuff, inviting people who are not in your demographic onto your Instagram, onto your Facebook, into your class to be a guest teacher or whatever it might be.
yeah.
But I think in general, it is just this, you know, it's not been normal for BIPOC people to have affluence and abundance and wealth. And so when you think about, you know, if you're just struggling to make ends meet and to put food on the table and, you know, whatever else, are you likely to be thinking, oh, let me go to a yoga class? Or,
Yeah.
oh, I've got heavy periods, let me find out about menstrual cycle awareness? Like, no. it's
Exactly.
probably not. It's like, just, you know, you're dealing with that hierarchy of needs, and the first need is just to survive.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is that it's always the people who are in that bracket who need it the most, whether it's to do with race or whatever. It's always the
Yeah.
people who are like in survival mode who actually need this work the most. And I think that now things are obviously changing. Like, you know, it is becoming normal to see a diverse range of people in the workplace, as self-employed people, and, you know, the distribution of wealth, while it's still
Yeah.
completely like
I
completely
know.
separate, it's getting a little bit better. And so it means that there is maybe that little bit of extra money to make sure that your basics are taken care of, so that you can actually then be like, okay, what do I need? And so I
Yeah.
think it's a question of time, as in time for things to just develop naturally. It's a question of things being made available. So I gave 2 scholarship places for Love Your Flow because I couldn't choose between the 2 of them, and I didn't want to. And I thought, well,
Yeah.
there's no real need, no real reason for me to just restrict it to one person. And it wasn't
Yeah.
about money. And I was very clear about that, because it wasn't, you know, to say that it's for BIPOC people because they can't afford this. It was more about, it's for BIPOC people because I want to increase the number of diverse people who are in this space, because the way that you learn from someone who understands what you go through day to day is going to be different than if you're learning from someone who has absolutely no idea what your reality is.
Yeah.
So, you know, it just kind of felt important that it's more like, I'm giving this space here for people who look like me to come into this space and learn. We might be completely different. We might have like such different backgrounds and everything, but I understand what it's like to be a person of color. I mean, I live in a village with, I would say, probably about 1,000 people, and I would say there's maybe no more than like a dozen people who aren't white in this village. Are we all the same? No, but we all know what it feels like to be in that minority. And women know that
Yeah.
just from being women. You know,
Yeah.
probably blonde people know that just from being blonde. Like, there's, so you can drill it down to so many different things, but I think it's just about like opening the space and having those uncomfortable conversations and saying like, hey, why is it that my class is only filled with white people? Why is it only like white people who are buying my courses? And how can I change that? If you want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
But I think,
hope you do.
yeah, no, geez, yeah, I wouldn't be having this conversation if I if I
Right,
wasn't.
exactly.
Yeah, but no, and it's a couple of things you said there. I remember even with like the stock imagery, because it's something that I'd be like like not hyper aware, but I'd be very conscious of, because I'm just like the default for so much stuff. Like, and again, it's changed over the last couple of years. But I remember when I started posting stuff on Instagram, or you go onto like stock or whatever, you try and like find some images, and you'd be like fitness woman or whatever. It would all be like white, skinny,
Yeah.
not always blonde, but like a lot of blondes and some brunettes. And like, you know, even trying to find a redhead woman, like not that that's the thing, but you just be like where's the where are the normal people? Like, and I'm not saying they're not normal, but like
Yeah.
that's only one small smidgen of the what like people look like. I was just it was so anyway. I used to, now when I'm even searching in Canva and stuff like that, there's more diversity when you're looking for graphics in the last year, which I think is
Yeah.
brilliant. Canva, if you're listening, but like stuff like that like obviously it shouldn't have been that way at the start, but it's just, at least thankfully it's slowly starting to take. But it's shocking once you notice it, that you're just like, how is this all that's available to me right now for
I mean,
stock
I was the
images,
same with
or you
me.
know?
I used stock
Yeah.
images a lot in the beginning because I didn't have my own pictures of, you
Mm.
know, like for my very first retreat, I'd never had a retreat before, so I had to find some stock images, and I never noticed, like, when I noticed that I myself was, you know, using only white people across my website, that was kind of like, whoa, why is that? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, because that's all that's available. There are now whole websites that
Yeah.
also have, you know, it's just for people of color, so that people who, you
Amazing.
know, have that. But in the beginning, that wasn't a thing. So you're just
Yeah.
doing what's possible. So there
Yeah.
is, you know, it's not that I don't like to make excuses. There's no excuse for it, but a lot of it is also just the way that things have been. But
Yeah.
now, like for people who do want to change this, it is entirely possible to find something else. You just have to Google
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
Google it. It
exactly.
doesn't have to be difficult.
I know. Or think of those things like again, one what I do in my classes or in all the service I offer is pay what you can space and everything. And that's it doesn't matter for water or anything because I'm like, well, all of my costs again, it's not that it's a money thing, but like if you're even just looking at it from a pure financial point of view, I'm like, all of my costs are covered by everyone else who is in a position to pay. And for anyone who is in a position to pay or just needs the accessibility for whatever reason,
Mm.
like that's there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I think in one way the Zoom stuff was good because you saw people opening up, say, donation-based classes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that's fantastic. And actually, it's one of those things I think if I was ever to go back to it, I might kind of explore because it allows people in a way that no one else needs to know about because it's online and you're only paying like €1 or €5 or 20 and then someone else pay 50 because they know you're doing this and it will all, you know, and it's all going to even, or it's like a concession based thing or something.
Yeah.
You're adding an extra euro on and they know that it's going towards helping people out who can't pay full price. And I'm just like, you're seeing it more and more, or at least, sorry, I'm seeing it more and more. And I just think
Mm-hmm.
it's brilliant because health and wellness is such a privileged position, as you said, that like
Yeah.
Maslow hierarchy of needs. And when you were talking about it, I was like straight in my head. I was like, you're not going to be seeking self-actualization about through menstrual cycle awareness if you're like struggling and working two jobs, or you know, you're pregnant and you're like, how the hell am I going to pay for you
Mm-hmm.
know childcare or whatever and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's amazing that you've had such positive responses through that, and I think. I don't know. I'll try and look back and like I find it so hard to get the timings because Instagram does it in a weird way, but I'm always like, so I'll definitely make sure to kind of call out this section as well so that people can go back and see
Mm.
it because I think it's just trying to make those conversations more normalized, especially now like things are quieting down a tiny bit and not that they shouldn't have, but it's
Mm.
you can see it happening a little bit and I think it's
Yeah.
just like let's just keep those conversations going and give people the opportunities to hear those conversations in a space and you know all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there's so much more that myself and loads of other people could be doing, but at least trying
Yeah.
to open that stuff up and yeah,
Just
so I think it's
ask
great.
people, you know,
I
like
know.
just I mean, I've had like lots of conversations about this stuff with people because they've just asked, like, what can I do? Like, is it,
Yeah,
you know, is it offensive if I'm doing this? Or, you know, just ask. It's not always comfortable, but it's much
yeah.
more uncomfortable to just pretend that it doesn't
Or be
exist,
like,
like, you know.
yeah,
And it's
exactly.
and I would rather that than, you know, this, like, it was the same when I had my workshop as well, my white privilege workshop. It was, you know, busy, were buying it, like I made it on demand because people couldn't make it and they were asking like, oh, can I have it, can I have it? And then after a while it just, you know, just died. And that's just the
Yeah,
way, like, you know, it's the way that we're used to with news and stuff. But most
yeah,
of us have like at least one person of color who is like, you know, in our environment. And if
mm.
you're really like, I want things to change, then just have the conversation. It's, you know, we're not scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, you
I
know,
think
just have the
it's one of those
conversation.
things. Yeah, it's just like the fear of getting it wrong. But it's
Yeah.
like I think what you're saying there is lovely. It's just like, well, it's okay to make the mistakes if the intention is good and you're willing to apologize for it and learn from it. Because
Yes.
like, you know, like you can't just expect to know what the right thing to do is, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
without asking and being like,
Yeah.
well, how do we make this better and how do we make it more equitable and
Right.
accessible and break down those barriers of when you walk into a class and it's only like white able-bodied
Mm-hmm.
people, you know, like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
no. Thanks so much for talking about it on me
Yeah,
with
sure.
me on this. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's good.
sure.
Um, and look, I'm excited to see where all of the stuff's going to go, especially with the period power up.
Yeah.
Anyone who is working in a similar space to me and just we're just working on their own, as you said.
Yeah.
We're in some sort of place of autonomy. It's just an incredible tool, I think, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited to see where it's going to go for you.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah, so for anyone who's listening, how can they kind of find out about that stuff or kind of learn more about what you do and
Yeah.
get in contact?
Yeah, so here on Instagram is a great place, natalie.kmartin, and my website is nataliekmartin.com, and there's like all the information about the coaching I do, about the Love Your Flow course, about premenstrual power up, and a blog that's pretty regular as well. So
Amazing.
yeah.
So good. Fab. Well, look, thanks so much. I'm conscious of taking more of your time because we spent ages chatting about loads of really important stuff, which is great. But no, I really, really appreciate you giving up your time to come on and have a chat with me,
Yeah.
especially with the sunny weather that you're having as well.
Oh, it's gone now, but hopefully it'll come back.
I hope you come back. Yeah, I know. We're the same. It's supposed to be dry over the weekend, so I'm like, okay, it's fine. That'll do. That's all right.
As long as it doesn't rain,
I'll take it.
all good.
I know. Anyway, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, Natalie. Thanks a million.
Bye.
Bye. See ya. Bye bye.